My name is Amelia Bennett. I am 36 years old, and 20 years ago my parents threw me out for getting pregnant in 10th grade. I was 16, standing in November rain with one suitcase, while my mother pointed to the door and said I was dead to them. That same night they signed papers erasing me from the family, me and any child I might ever bring into this world. I kept those papers. I kept every receipt of what they did, every line, every date, every signature they thought would bury me. For 2 decades, I was invisible while they told everyone I had moved abroad and built a perfect reputation over my grave. Then last week, they appeared at my door smiling, desperate, and demanding to meet the grandson they had bragged about. They had promised that grandson to 200 powerful friends, and they even offered me $250,000. They had no idea the grandson they promised did not exist, and what they found instead would destroy everything they built. Portland, Oregon, November 2004. I was 16, a sophomore, and the youngest child of Charles Bennett and Vivian Bennett. On paper, we were the perfect church family, polished, respected, admired, and carefully arranged like a portrait. My father owned a successful real estate law practice downtown, Bennett and Associates, a firm he wore like a crown. My mother had been president of the Parent-Teacher Association for 4 straight years and ruled every social circle nearby. Every Sunday, we sat in the front pew at Grace Fellowship Church in coordinated outfits my mother planned the night before. We smiled on cue, shook hands with the right people, and made sure our family looked like a sermon about virtue. But every family has a hierarchy, and I learned mine early, quietly, and without anyone ever saying it out loud. Ethan Bennett, my older brother, was 22 and in dental school, the son who would carry the Bennett name with pride. Rebecca Bennett, 20, was studying to become a teacher, beautiful, polished, obedient, and never inclined to ask hard questions. Then there was me, the surprise, the child my mother once described with a smile too thin to be kind. I was born when she was 34, 6 years after she thought she was done having children forever. I do not think she ever forgave me for arriving late and disturbing the tidy life she believed she deserved. The signs were subtle, but they were constant, like cold air slipping through a window that no one else admitted was open. Family photos in the living room somehow never included my school portraits, though there was always space for the others. Dinner talk centered on Ethan Bennett's clinical rotations or Rebecca Bennett's student teaching assignments and future plans. If I mentioned making the honor roll, my father would nod once and say, "That is nice, Amelia Bennett." Then he would turn back to Ethan Bennett before my sentence even had time to finish breathing at the table. I learned to make myself small, to ask for little, to need less, and to disappear before anyone asked me to. My father had a saying he repeated at every gathering, as if it were scripture carved into the family walls. Reputation takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to destroy. He said it so often I could hear it in my sleep. I did not understand then how prophetic those words would become, or that I would be the 5 minutes he feared. I met Julian Brooks at the public library downtown, the one place where I could breathe without being measured. The library was my sanctuary, a quiet world where nobody compared me to my siblings or my family's expectations. I went there 3 afternoons a week, pretending to study, but really I went there to feel human for a while. Julian Brooks attended Jefferson High, the public school my parents spoke about as if it were a contagious disease. He was 17, worked part-time at his uncle's auto repair shop, and had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. He found me crying in the biography section one October afternoon after my mother forgot me at school again. It was the 3rd time that month she had forgotten to pick me up, and I told myself not to cry. But I did. Julian Brooks sat across from me and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" Like the answer actually mattered to him. No one had asked me that in a very long time, and something in me broke open the moment he did. We started talking after that, first about books, then school, then everything else I usually kept locked inside. We dated in secret for 2 months, stolen afternoons and whispered phone calls hidden between family rules and church routines. He was gentle and patient and made me feel seen, like I was someone worth remembering when the room went quiet. With Julian Brooks, I did not feel like the leftover child in a perfect family portrait that had no place for me. On October 28, 2004, I took a pregnancy test in a gas station bathroom 3 miles from school. I will never forget staring at those 2 pink lines while my hands shook so hard I could barely breathe. The mirror looked back at a terrified girl who already knew her parents would not ask if she was safe. Their first question would be what people would think, whose son it was, and how badly I had embarrassed them. When I told Julian Brooks, he did not run, did not lie, and did not reach for the nearest excuse. He held my shaking hands and said, "We will figure this out together, Amelia Bennett. You are not alone." I wanted to believe him completely, and part of me did, but I also knew the people waiting at home. I knew what mattered most inside the Bennett house, and love had never ranked above image, control, and approval. I decided to tell them at Sunday dinner because hiding it any longer felt like waiting on my own execution. I did not know that meal would be the last one I would ever eat under their roof. Sunday, November 14th, 2004, 7:32 p.m. The roast beef was overcooked, and I remember that clearly. I stared at the dry meat on my plate while my father complained about a property dispute, and my mother planned a church gala. Ethan Bennett was home for the weekend, Rebecca Bennett was visiting from college, and 4 faces turned when I spoke. I said, "I have something to tell you," and the room went still in the way only dangerous rooms can. My mother lowered her fork. My father did not move, even the clock seemed to hold its breath. I told them I was 8 weeks pregnant and could not hide it any longer. And then the silence changed shape. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. My father's face stayed blank, which was somehow worse than shouting. He asked who the father was, his voice cold enough to turn the whole table into stone. He wanted to know if it was a boy from St. Catherine's, someone respectable, someone they already knew. I said his name was Julian Brooks, and he went to Jefferson High and worked at his uncle's auto shop. My mother went pale and asked if I had been seeing a boy from the public school behind their backs. I said he was a good person and came from a good family, though even then I knew goodness meant nothing to them. My father cut in and asked what Julian Brooks's father did, as if income could measure a soul. I explained that he lived with his uncle and worked hard, and that should have mattered more than status, but it did not. The silence that followed lasted exactly 11 seconds. I counted each one because fear sharpens strange details. Then Charles Bennett stood up and said, "You will not keep it," like my child was a stain to erase. My mother started to speak, but not to defend me. She spoke only to protect what they had built. Father looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was a threat that needed to be removed immediately. He said if I kept that baby, I would no longer be part of the family, and the sentence fell like a gate. By 9:15, I was standing on the front porch with one suitcase while rain soaked through my sweater. It was not my father who opened the door and pointed outside. It was my mother, Vivian Bennett. Ethan Bennett and Rebecca Bennett watched from the upstairs window while I stood in the rain below. Neither of them came downstairs. Neither of them said my name. Neither of them stopped what was happening. I walked to the gas station on Mulberry Street and used a payphone because I had nowhere else to go. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial, but Julian Brooks picked up on the second ring. He heard my voice, asked what was wrong, and I told him they had kicked me out of the house. 20 minutes later, his uncle's truck pulled into the gas station lot with bad brakes and better mercy. Julian Brooks jumped out before it fully stopped, wrapped me in his jacket and held me while I sobbed. He kept saying, "I have got you," as if those words could build shelter, and for that moment, they did. We had no plan, just $300, a rattling truck, a pregnancy, and the kind of fear that follows you home. That was when Elena Alvarez saved my life, though back then I still knew her as Mrs. Torres. She lived 3 houses down from the Bennett home and never acted like my father owned the neighborhood. She had seen me standing in the rain from her window and watched long enough to understand what had happened. When I knocked on her door close to 10 that night, she let me in without making me beg for kindness. She said I could stay as long as I needed, and those words felt more maternal than anything I had heard at home. Julian Brooks stayed with us as often as he could, helping me breathe through panic and plan beyond the next morning. We stayed in Elena Alvarez's guest room for 2 weeks while Julian Brooks searched for anything we could afford. Then he found us a studio apartment in Seattle, $425 a month above a laundromat. The place smelled like bleach, wet clothes, and secondhand hope, but to me, it smelled like survival. 3 days after I was thrown out, my father mailed me a certified letter requiring my signature. He wanted to make sure I received it, as if disowning me needed the dignity of legal confirmation. The document stated that Amelia Bennett forfeited all inheritance rights from the Bennett family estate. It also declared that the family bore no legal or moral obligation to me or to any child born to me. I read those lines over and over until the words stopped being English and became a wound with punctuation. I kept that paper. I have kept it for 20 years, folded and saved like evidence waiting for daylight. On July 6, 2005, Lily Amelia Brooks was born at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. She weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces, had 10 fingers, 10 toes, her father's brown eyes, and my stubborn chin. She entered the world screaming, and I remember thinking, good, scream loud, never let anyone make you small. The first 5 years after that were a blur of exhaustion, hunger, bills, and learning how to survive on almost nothing. Julian Brooks worked double shifts in Ballard while I finished my GED and took community college classes when I could. I measured my days by diapers, bus schedules, class times, and how many hours of sleep I could survive without. We ate ramen noodles and free day-old bread from the bakery down the street more nights than I can count. I learned how to sew patches onto patches to stretch $1 until it begged for mercy in my hands. When Lily Amelia Brooks was born, I sent my parents a birth announcement because some part of me still hoped. They never responded. On her first birthday, I mailed them a photograph, and silence came back again. By her second birthday, I stopped trying to be wanted by people who had already made their choice. Julian Brooks and I never got married, though we kept promising we would someday when life became gentler. Someday kept moving farther away, pushed by bills, work, exhaustion, and the belief that there would be more time later. On March 15, 2010, a delivery truck ran a red light on Aurora Avenue and ended that someday forever. Julian Brooks was driving home from a night shift when the truck hit him, and he died on impact. The police officer who came to my door said those words like procedure, but they split my life clean in half. He was 26 years old. Lily Amelia Brooks was 4. I was 22 and suddenly alone in every direction. The life insurance through his work paid $12,000, and that was all the world offered for his life. $12,000 for a good man who had held me together when everyone else let me fall apart. I was a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter, $12,000, and absolutely no one to call. I could have given up then. Some nights I wanted to, but grief does not pay rent, and despair does not feed children. While Julian Brooks was alive, I had started doing small interior design jobs for neighbors and struggling agents. I decorated apartments for people who could not afford professionals and staged homes for clients willing to take a chance. People said I had an eye, a way of making cramped rooms feel honest, warm, and lived in. After Julian Brooks died, I threw myself into that work because my life actually depended on it. I carried paint swatches in my purse, measured curtains with Lily Amelia Brooks asleep nearby, and learned by doing. Every small project led to another, and every satisfied client became a bridge to the next month's rent. In 2012, I met Charlotte Hayes at a design workshop at Seattle Central College, and everything shifted. She was 52, newly retired as a creative director, and clearly did not need to mentor anyone at all. Yet for reasons I still cannot fully explain, Charlotte Hayes chose me after seeing my rough little portfolio. She said I had talent, raw and unpolished but real, and that real mattered more than polish at the start. Then she offered to help me shape it, and that sentence opened a door I had never seen before. Charlotte Hayes taught me how to present, negotiate, refine, and trust my instincts without apologizing for them. In 2014, after 3 painful attempts, I secured a $50,000 SBA loan and founded Hearth Home Interiors. Our first office was basically a converted closet inside a shared workspace with thin walls and loud neighbors. I did not care. It was mine, earned with grit, borrowed courage, and years of refusing to vanish. In the early days, I answered phones, sketched concepts, handled invoices, and cleaned the coffee cups myself. By 2018, we had 8 employees and annual revenue of $1.2 million, a number I once thought belonged to other lives. I hired people who were creative, hungry, kind, and not interested in treating others like props in a social performance. By 2022, Seattle Met magazine ran a feature story titled, "From Teen Mom to Design CEO, Amelia Bennett's Story." The journalist, Natalie Chen, interviewed me for 3 days about everything that shaped the woman I became. I told her about getting pregnant at 16, being cut off, losing Julian Brooks, and building a business from dust. I told her almost everything except my parents' names because I wanted to protect Lily Amelia Brooks from strangers. I was not protecting Charles Bennett or Vivian Bennett. They had lost any right to that from me. I was protecting my daughter from people who might connect her to a family that never wanted her existence. By 2024, Hearth Home Interiors had 22 employees and annual revenue of $4.2 million. I had a corner office overlooking Capitol Hill and a schedule full of clients who respected my work and my time. Lily. Amelia Brooks was 19 by then, a sophomore at the University of Washington majoring in psychology. 6. She was brilliant, fierce, observant, and everything I had hoped she could become when I first held her. 20 years passed without contact from the Bennett family, and I began to believe silence might be permanent. Then came Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, at 6:47 in the evening, and the past parked in my driveway. I had just returned from a client meeting about a Mercer Island renovation worth $800,000. My mind was full of lighting plans and fabric samples when I turned onto my street and saw the black Mercedes. It was a black S-Class with Oregon plates, too polished to belong to a casual visit or an ordinary mistake. I parked in my driveway and sat there gripping the steering wheel while 2 figures stood at my front door. The man had gray hair now and shoulders bent by age or pride. The woman still held herself rigidly upright. I knew them instantly, even after 20 years. Charles Bennett and Vivian Bennett had found my house. For 1 full minute, I considered driving away, getting a hotel, or pretending none of this was happening. Then I remembered I was 36. I owned a company, and I had built a life without their permission. I got out of the car and walked toward them with my keys still clutched in my hand like armor. My father spoke first, said my name, looked me over, and paused when he saw the house, the coat, the bag. My mother stepped forward and said they knew about my son, said it like she had a right to the word. I stared at her because I had no son, and the absurdity nearly cracked the whole scene open on the spot. My father added that they wanted to meet him, reconnect as a family, and finally mend what had happened. 20 years of silence. And suddenly they wanted reconciliation shaped exactly like the public image they required. I let them into my house, though even now I do not fully know whether that was curiosity or unfinished anger. My father sat in my living room like he was evaluating a property, not entering the life he had once erased. My mother perched on the sofa's edge with her back straight and hands folded, still performing composure. I asked if this was about their anniversary, and my father almost smiled when he said 50 years. November 15th, they were hosting a grand celebration at the Heathman Hotel with 200 guests in attendance. The mayor would be there, the church leaders would be there, the Rotary Board would be there, and appearances mattered. I asked what any of that had to do with me after 2 decades of silence that they had chosen themselves. My mother glanced at my father before admitting people had started asking questions about their missing 3rd child. Some remembered they once had another daughter, and the old lie about Europe was beginning to crack under curiosity. My father said they had always told people I moved abroad, but lately the questions had become more persistent. So they needed me to show up, smile, and help make the Bennett family look whole and admired again. But that was not all. They also needed my son, the grandson they had already told everyone about. I asked who had told them I had a son, and my father waved toward the article as if it explained everything. He said the magazine mentioned my child and successful business, and they assumed the rest because assumption suited them. My father said I had done better than they expected, as though my life had been a report card he graded. Then he pulled a blank check from his leather briefcase and placed it on my coffee table. He said they were prepared to compensate me, and that word made my stomach turn inside my chest. $250,000 if I brought my son to the party, stayed for 3 hours, and posed for photos. I repeated the number because hearing it aloud made the transaction more grotesque, more honest in its ugliness. My mother leaned forward and sweetened the offer with the family trust, as if greed could undo abandonment. She whispered that the combined estate was worth $3.8 million, and I could share equally with my siblings. I thought about the laundromat apartment, the unpaid bills, the nights Lily Amelia Brooks slept behind a counter. I remembered building a life from nothing while they sat in Portland pretending I was somewhere glamorous and distant. I asked what happened if I refused, and that was when my father let the threat show its teeth. He said they could reach out to my child directly, explain the family history, and help him understand his roots, subtle, polished, and venomous. He was threatening to rewrite my story for a child he had never met. I repeated it back slowly, asking if he truly wanted to contact my child and tell his version of my life. My mother spread her hands and asked if being a family again was not what I had always wanted. I was about to answer when I heard footsteps on the stairs, and everything in that room changed at once. Lily Amelia Brooks came down holding a psychology textbook, wearing sweatpants and a University of Washington hoodie. She looked exactly like what she was, a 19-year-old college student interrupted in the middle of an ordinary evening. My mother stood, her face moving through confusion, calculation, and finally something close to horror when she saw her. She asked who that was, and I stepped slightly between my daughter and the people who had once erased her. I told them, "This is Lily Amelia Brooks, my daughter, your granddaughter." And the truth landed hard. My father's voice cracked when he said daughter, because they had built their lie around a grandson. He tried to reference the article, but I cut him off and said it only mentioned a child, not a son. Lily Amelia Brooks looked from me to them and understood instantly who these strangers were and why they were there. She asked if these were the grandparents who threw me out when I was pregnant with her at 16. My mother flinched and started saying it was more complicated then, but the sentence fell apart before it could stand. Lily Amelia Brooks asked which part was complicated, the rain, the expulsion, or the 20 years of pretending. My father tried to address her with stiff authority, but she cut him off and said she was not his young lady. She said she was the grandchild they never wanted to meet, the one they tried to erase before she was born. Her voice stayed steady, though I could see her hands trembling with the force of what she was carrying. She said she knew everything. The letter, the inheritance papers, the lies told to church friends about Europe. My parents sat there stunned while the child they had denied stood alive in front of them and refused to shrink. Lily Amelia Brooks asked if they had come for a grandson, someone polished and easy to display at their party. I said yes, and she smiled a cold little smile and said, "Surprise," with more dignity than they deserved. My father recovered first, the lawyer in him adjusting to a new variable he had not prepared for. He said a granddaughter could work too, that they could adjust the narrative if needed, as though she were branding. Lily Amelia Brooks asked as what exactly the secret granddaughter they hid for 19 years by choice. My mother suggested they could tell people I had been studying abroad and had only recently returned home. Lily Amelia Brooks laughed without humor and reminded them she was born in Seattle and had never left the country. She told them she was a sophomore at UW and asked if they could even hear their own absurdity. My father glanced at his watch and said the party was on November 15th and they needed an answer by the 10th. I stood and told them they should leave before that room became smaller than all the lies inside it. My mother gathered her handbag and paused at the door to call this an opportunity to heal the family. She told me not to let old wounds cost me my future, as if their cruelty were some mutual misunderstanding. I watched them walk back to their Mercedes with the same choreography of privilege they had always relied on. When the car disappeared around the corner, Lily Amelia Brooks asked if I was actually considering their offer. I looked at my daughter, the person they tried to erase before birth, and said no, but I was not done yet. That night, after Lily Amelia Brooks went upstairs, I opened a fireproof lockbox from the back of my closet. Inside were the documents of my erasure, folded and preserved like bones from a life someone tried to bury. The disinheritance letter was notarized, dated November 14, 2004, and signed by Charles Bennett and Vivian Bennett. It declared that Amelia Bennett forfeited all claims to the Bennett estate, and any dependency thereof was also excluded. Any dependency thereof. 3 cold words that had erased Lily Amelia Brooks before she ever took her first breath. I photographed every page with my phone, uploaded each file to cloud storage, and made backup copies. Then Lily Amelia Brooks appeared in my bedroom doorway, arms wrapped around herself, unable to sleep either. She sat beside me on the bed and looked at the documents spread across my comforter like a crime scene. She asked if that was the letter, and I said yes, though it felt larger than a letter and smaller than justice. She picked up the first page and read slowly, the legal language sharp and lifeless in her young hands. When she finished, her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall in front of me. She whispered that they really did it, that they really cut me out like I was nothing at all. I said yes, they did, and for a moment we sat with 20 years of proof between us. She asked what I was going to do with the documents, and I admitted I did not know yet. But I told her whatever I did, they would never again get to pretend this history did not happen. She nodded slowly and said she might have an idea, and I saw that fierce mind already working. The next morning, I called Elena Alvarez, the woman who had opened her door when my own mother closed hers. She answered on the third ring and called me sweetheart, like time had never touched the affection in her voice. I asked if I was calling too early, and she joked that at her age early was a flexible concept. Then she heard my tone and asked what was wrong because she could still read pain through a phone line. I told her about my parents' visit, the imaginary grandson, the anniversary party, and the $250,000. She went quiet for a long moment before saying those people had not changed one bit in 20 years. I asked if she remembered the night of November 14th, 2004, and her voice changed immediately. She said she remembered it like yesterday, remembered me in the rain with that little suitcase at my feet. She had watched from her window, seen my parents' car drive away, and regretted not coming outside sooner. I asked if she still had the old security camera footage from back then, though I barely dared hope. She paused, then said she never deleted anything, old teacher habit, document everything, keep the record. 20 minutes later, she emailed me a grainy image with a visible timestamp in the corner of the frame. It showed a 16-year-old girl on a porch in the rain at 9:17 p.m. on November 14th, 2004. Part of the Bennett address was visible in the frame, and the girl in the image was unmistakably me. Elena Alvarez said she would verify the image officially if needed and sounded almost relieved to finally be asked. She told me she had been waiting 20 years for someone to ask her for the truth. I thanked her, hung up, and realized I now had 2 pieces of evidence and 2 living witnesses. That evening, I reread my own Seattle Met profile and saw it through my parents' selfish eyes for the first time. The article was still online, shared more than 12,000 times since its publication in March 2022. Natalie Chen had written about loss, resilience, motherhood, grief, and the life I built from ruins. I had told the truth there, but not the whole truth, because some truths are too sharp for public hands. Scrolling through the comments, I saw people calling me inspiring, brave, and living proof that survival can become power. Then one comment from 2 weeks earlier caught my attention and changed everything about the timing of my parents' visit. It asked whether I was related to the Bennett family in Portland, the law firm someone had mentioned at church. That was how they found me, through a careless thread of public curiosity and their own hunger for image management. My phone rang, and it was Charlotte Hayes, who somehow already knew my parents had materialized after 2 decades. I laughed because Seattle is a city where news moves faster than weather and just as relentlessly. She asked what I needed, and I said maybe advice, maybe perspective, maybe someone to steady the room. Charlotte Hayes reminded me I had spent 20 years proving who I was without them or their permission. She warned me not to let 3 hours at their party undo everything I had built with blood and discipline. She was right, but by then I was already thinking bigger than 3 hours and larger than their stage. On Thursday, November 7th, 2024 at 3:42 p.m., an Oregon number lit up on my phone. I nearly ignored it, but the voicemail would have found me anyway, so I answered and heard Ethan Bennett. His voice was deeper now, weathered by age and guilt, but I knew it instantly as my brother's. He said he had no right to call, no right to ask for my attention, and no defense worth offering first. I told him to talk, and the silence on his end sounded like someone finally stepping toward a locked door. He explained that the imaginary grandson story had started with my mother after reading the magazine article badly. She saw the word child, saw my success, and decided I must have a brilliant son carrying the Bennett legacy. She built a whole mythology around that boy, telling church friends and Rotary friends for months. My father went along with it because a fictional grandson was apparently easier than admitting a discarded daughter. I closed my eyes listening to that, still stunned by their capacity to lie even after all these years. I asked why Ethan Bennett was telling me now after 20 years of silence and upstairs windows. He said because he had been a coward, and because if he stayed quiet now, he would fail me twice. He admitted that he should have come downstairs that night, should have spoken, should have done anything except watch. He said Rebecca Bennett had talked with him for years about their guilt and the weight of what they allowed. He told me she had 2 children and feared they might grow up feeling never good enough like we had. I asked why neither of them reached out in all those years if the regret had been real all along. He confessed he found my number 5 years earlier through my business website and dialed it many times. Each time he hung up before it connected because talking to me meant admitting what he had let happen. I asked what had changed now, and he said watching our parents try to buy me like a party prop. Then he told me something crucial. The anniversary event would include a family moment live-streamed on the church Facebook page. Pastor Samuel Whitaker wanted it as a public testimony of unity for the congregation and all who watched online. 200 people in the room, and who knew how many more beyond the camera, all ready to witness a lie. I thanked Ethan Bennett for telling me, and realized the shape of my plan was finally becoming visible. The next morning, Friday, November 8th, my father called directly with no greeting, only pressure. He said they were running out of time, the party was in 1 week, and the offer on the table was final. $250,000 and reinstatement into the family trust, as if he were bargaining over property lines. I told him I had spoken to Ethan Bennett, and the silence on the phone tightened like a fist. I said he had told me about the grandson fiction they were selling to everyone based on a misread article. My father tried to minimize it, saying they may have embellished slightly as though inventing a human being were a footnote. I told him he had invented an entire person and was now trying to use me to make the lie real. He said he did not appreciate my tone after everything they were offering, still convinced generosity could erase cruelty. I reminded him he was not offering me anything new, only trying to buy his way out of consequences. Then his anger came through fully, and he said I had no right to judge them after what I had done. He said I was the one who destroyed the family, the one who brought shame, the one who started all this. I answered that I had been 16, scared, pregnant, and in need of parents who cared more than appearances. I told him he threw me out like garbage and spent 20 years pretending I was dead because reputation mattered more. He warned that if I skipped the party, I would never have another chance to be part of the family. I told him he said the same thing 20 years earlier and I built a better life without them anyway. He hung up on me, and I sat in my office with my heart pounding and the week suddenly very clear. That evening, I sat at my dining table with Lily, Amelia Brooks, and Charlotte Hayes and laid everything out. I told them about the threats, the check, the trust, the live stream, the documents, and the footage from Elena Alvarez. Charlotte Hayes said they wanted a performance, a smiling daughter and grandson to validate 20 years of lies. Lily Amelia Brooks said they wanted to use me again as something to manage instead of someone to love. I looked at the 2 people who had become my chosen family and made my decision without shaking. I said I was going to the party, not to surrender, but to tell the truth on the stage they built. Lily Amelia Brooks immediately said she was coming too because they needed to see who she really was. I asked if she was sure because confrontation has a cost even when justice is on your side. She said she had lived her whole life knowing her grandparents chose reputation over her existence. So yes, she was sure. That night, I called Ethan Bennett and asked if his offer to stand with me still held. He said yes, and he added that Rebecca Bennett was ready too, though neither expected forgiveness on demand. I told him not to warn our parents, not to soften the blow, and not to steal the truth's timing. He agreed, and I looked out at the Seattle skyline feeling steadier than I had in years. Saturday, November 15th, 2024, 6:47 p.m., Lily Amelia Brooks and I entered the Heathman Hotel. The Crystal Ballroom was exactly what my parents would choose. Expensive, bright, controlled, and desperate to impress. Chandeliers glittered above white tablecloths, floral centerpieces bloomed like money, and champagne moved from hand to hand. 200 guests in formal wear filled the room with polished voices about golf handicaps, boards, and investments. Lily Amelia Brooks wore a simple navy dress, elegant and grounded, impossible to mistake for anyone else. I wore black, professional, and understated, the kind of look that does not shout yet still commands a room. At the far end stood a raised platform where my parents would make their speeches and sell their image. A camera crew was setting up the church live stream, and I could already see the Facebook Live indicator glowing. Charles Bennett and Vivian Bennett stood on stage greeting guests with the confidence of people who thought they had won. My mother wore champagne-colored silk. My father wore a tailored navy suit. Both looked like self-congratulation made visible. They had not noticed us yet, but whispers started near the doorway as heads turned and recognition spread. Someone murmured that I was the daughter from the article, the design CEO from Seattle, and the ripples widened. My mother looked up first, and her smile froze so suddenly it seemed to crack under the ballroom lights. My father was already beginning his speech, telling the room that 50 years of marriage had taught them family was everything. He said he and Vivian Bennett had built their lives around family, community, faith, and those familiar sacred words. The live stream comments on the monitor praised them as an inspiration while the actual truth walked toward the stage. My mother gripped my father's arm. He followed her gaze and stopped mid-sentence when he saw me approaching. The room grew quieter with each step I took, not like in movies, but with the hush of real anticipation. Lily Amelia Brooks walked beside me with her chin high and her steps steady, and that gave me strength. At the edge of the crowd, I saw Ethan Bennett and Rebecca Bennett watching, neither trying to stop me. My father forced a strained smile into the microphone and called my arrival a surprise they were not expecting. I climbed the 3 steps to the platform and felt the camera follow my movement like a witness with memory. Then I took the microphone from his hand before he could shape the moment into something safe for himself. I introduced myself to the room as Amelia Bennett, the youngest daughter of Charles Bennett and Vivian Bennett. I told them many did not know me because my parents had spent 20 years saying I went to Europe. I said I did not go to Europe. I was thrown out of their house on November 14, 2004. I explained that I was 16, pregnant, and cast out the same night my parents decided my existence was inconvenient. A gasp moved through the room, small at first, then larger, like disbelief learning how to stand. I said they had their lawyer draft papers disowning me and told me I was dead to the family. Then I pulled the notarized letter from my bag and held it high enough for the camera to see. I read aloud the line saying I forfeited inheritance rights and that the family bore no obligation to me. I continued with the phrase, or any dependence thereof, then explained that dependency was the child I carried then. I pointed toward Lily Amelia Brooks and said that dependency was my daughter, their granddaughter, standing right there. I told them the grandson my parents had bragged about for months did not exist at all. I said they invented him after badly reading a magazine article and used that fantasy to impress their friends. My father lunged for the microphone and hissed that this was not the place, but I held it away. I asked him when the right place was, since private silence had protected him for 20 years already. I told the crowd my parents came to my home 1 week earlier and offered me $250,000. I said they wanted me to parade a fictional grandson at this party to make their lie look true. Then I turned toward the camera, the guests, and the world they valued more than their children, and kept speaking. I said I did not come for money and did not come for pity. I came because I was done being erased. Pastor Samuel Whitaker stepped forward and asked my father directly if what I was saying was true. My mother began crying. Real tears this time, cutting through makeup carefully chosen for celebration and applause. Pastor Samuel Whitaker repeated the question with the quiet force of a man who already knew the answer mattered. My father looked at the mayor, the church elders, the board members, and the collapse he could not negotiate away. At last he said it was a difficult time and they made decisions, still unable to name the cruelty plainly. I answered that they threw me out because I was pregnant and because their reputation mattered more than their child. Then Ethan Bennett stepped onto the stage, and Rebecca Bennett came with him, both carrying 20 years of silence. Ethan Bennett said I was telling the truth and that he and Rebecca Bennett watched from the window that night. He admitted they saw our parents put their 16-year-old sister into the rain and said nothing to stop it. Rebecca Bennett stood beside him, crying openly now, her silence from that night finally refusing to stay buried. The whispers in the ballroom became a roar as phones came out, messages flew, and reputations cracked in real time. I pointed toward Elena Alvarez in the back row, the neighbor who had flown from Portland that morning. I told the crowd she saw everything that night and had time-stamped footage proving where I stood and when. Elena Alvarez rose and said she watched me in the rain for 10 minutes before opening her door to me. She told the room the Bennett family never once asked where I went and never once came looking for me. People began leaving the ballroom. Others stayed frozen. Some stared at my parents like strangers wearing familiar faces. I handed the microphone back to my father and quietly told him I did not come to destroy him. I came to stop being invisible, and some truths destroy only because lies were never built to survive them. Then I faced the audience again and said I was not asking for sympathy because I had already built my life. I told them I owned a design company in Seattle with 22 employees and over $4 million in annual revenue. I said my daughter was a sophomore at the University of Washington and that we did all of it without Bennett help. I looked at the camera and said I was there because my parents had tried to buy my silence. I said they deserved to face the consequences of what they did in front of the community they valued most. Lily Amelia Brooks stepped onto the stage beside me and took my hand before asking for the microphone. She introduced herself as the granddaughter they never wanted and said she had always known the truth. She said she knew her grandparents chose reputation over her mother and by extension over her own life. She told them they could have known her, seen her birthdays, her school plays, her graduation, her becoming. Her voice cracked when she said they chose not to, and now they did not get to pretend that was our fault. She handed the microphone back, and we stepped down from the stage together without waiting for permission. Behind us, the crystal ballroom dissolved into open chaos, the sound of a lie losing oxygen in public. At the ballroom doors, I turned back one last time because there was one boundary still left to draw. I said I was not going to sue them, contest the will, or demand money from people who never knew love. I told them I was keeping the disinheritance papers as a reminder of who they really were, not as a weapon. Then I warned them that if they lied about me or contacted Lily Amelia Brooks without consent again, everything would go public. I said I had the letter, the footage, the witnesses, and now 200 more people who had heard tonight's truth. Then Charlotte Hayes appeared at my side like steady ground and asked if I was ready to leave. I said yes, and Lily Amelia Brooks squeezed my hand as we walked into the cold November night. The air outside felt clean, almost sharp, and for the first time in 20 years I could breathe fully. Lily Amelia Brooks asked if we had done the right thing, and I thought of the girl I once was in the rain. I thought of survival, years of building, and the right to exist without begging anyone for acknowledgement. I told her we told the truth, set a boundary, and let them face the consequences of their choices. I said that was not revenge. It was justice. And justice does not always look gentle when truth arrives late. By midnight, the live stream clip had already been shared hundreds of times across social media. By the next morning, the shares had tripled, and someone uploaded a titled video to YouTube that spread even faster. Guests left the party within 30 minutes of our departure, some shocked, some ashamed, some suddenly very busy. Ethan Bennett called Sunday morning and gave me a full report of the room after we walked out. He said the mayor left without saying goodbye to our father, and church board members followed soon after. He said some guests even apologized to him for never questioning the story they had been told for years. On Sunday afternoon, the Portland Herald published a short piece about the anniversary gala ending in family revelation. The article stayed neutral, but the comments did not, because communities forgive gossip more easily than visible proof. People wrote they had gone to church with the Bennetts for years and never knew any of this. Others asked what kind of man throws out his own child and then spends decades lying about it. By Monday, Charles Bennett resigned his position as elder at Grace Fellowship Church for personal reasons. Everyone knew what those personal reasons were, even if the bulletin tried to hide them behind polite phrasing. By Wednesday, the Rotary Board announced they would be reviewing membership criteria, and my father's name was mentioned. While Portland watched the fallout, I stayed in Seattle answering emails from potential clients and real human beings. 7 new inquiries came in that week from people who connected the old article to the viral video. Some fallout destroys, other fallout clarifies. Mine did both, and I was learning to accept that balance. The next Thursday, Natalie Chen called and said the video was everywhere and people wanted a follow-up piece. She suggested a new story about the CEO who confronted her past and asked what I thought about that. I told her I needed time because some stories deserve breath before they become headlines twice. But she also said the response had been overwhelming from people who saw themselves inside my story. Our company inbox filled with messages not about design but about family estrangement, teen motherhood, and survival. People wrote that the video made them call siblings, face old wounds, and finally believe their lives still mattered. 1 week after the party, Ethan Bennett and Rebecca Bennett came to my house for the first time in 20 years. We sat in the same living room where our parents had tried to buy my silence and talked for 6 long hours. Rebecca Bennett cried when she met Lily Amelia Brooks properly, not as a crisis, but as family long delayed. Their children played in my backyard while the adults tried to build something honest out of old wreckage. Ethan Bennett apologized and admitted sorry could never cover 20 years of silence and cowardice. I agreed it was not enough, but also said it was a beginning, and beginnings matter when the past was this broken. Lily Amelia Brooks watched from the doorway, seeing what extended family might look like when truth is finally invited in. A week after that, my phone rang with an Oregon number, and this time it was my mother. Vivian Bennett sounded smaller than I had ever heard her, as though consequence had stripped the varnish from her voice. She said she was not calling to apologize because she did not even know how to apologize for what they had done. I asked why she called then, and a long silence answered before the words finally came. She said she watched the live stream 11 times and kept searching my face, trying to see her daughter in it. She said hearing Lily Amelia Brooks say she grew up knowing we were unwanted made it hard for her to breathe. She added that my father was not handling the church, the Rotary, or the changed looks from colleagues very well. I told her I had not done any of it to punish them. I did it because I had to stop pretending. She said she knew that now and that we had left them no comfortable place to hide from themselves anymore. I asked again why she called, and her answer was simple enough to hurt because she wanted to hear my voice. She said it had been 20 years and she realized there was a real chance she might never hear it again. I told her I was not ready to forgive her and might never be, but I was not hanging up either. She said that was more than she deserved, and for once I did not soften the truth for her. We stayed on the line for another minute without speaking, connected only by what could not yet be repaired. She said goodbye without asking for a second chance, and that restraint felt like the first honest thing from her in years. Thanksgiving, 2024 arrived, and my refinished dining table seated 12 people in a house once entered by silence. Lily Amelia Brooks sat on my right. Charlotte Hayes sat on my left, both pillars in a life I chose. Elena Alvarez flew up from Portland again and taught my niece how to fold napkins into swans. Ethan Bennett carved the turkey while Rebecca Bennett's children argued over who got to light the candles first. My parents were not there. We had not reached that point, and maybe we never would. But looking around that table, I realized I had spent years mourning a family that never fully wanted me. Now I was surrounded by people who had chosen to be here, not for image, not for obligation, but for love. Lily Amelia Brooks stood to make a toast and unfolded a piece of paper she had written for me. She said when she was little, she asked why she did not have grandparents like other children. She said I always told her the truth, that they made a choice, and that choice was never about her worth. Then she looked at me and said she understood now that everything she is came from my refusal to let their choice define us. She raised her glass and toasted the family we build, not merely the one we are born into. Everyone drank, and later, when the dishes were done, I stood at the kitchen window watching my chosen life. Lily Amelia Brooks joined me and asked if I was okay, and I realized the answer had changed. I looked at my daughter and said yes, not politely, not performatively, but honestly and without fear. If you are still listening, this is what I want to leave with you after everything I have lived through. 20 years ago, I was a pregnant 16-year-old in the rain, certain that my life had ended on that porch. I was wrong. My life did not end there. It began in pain, but it kept unfolding toward people who chose me. I had Julian Brooks for as long as life allowed, and his love carried me farther than he ever knew. I had Elena Alvarez who opened her door without asking what my shame might cost her reputation. I had Charlotte Hayes who saw potential where others only saw lack and treated talent like something worth growing. I had Lily Amelia Brooks who learned the truth early and chose to become fierce instead of bitter. And eventually I had myself, the version of me who stopped asking anyone for permission to exist. If your family makes you feel like you must shrink yourself to be acceptable, I understand that kind of ache. If your worth always seems conditional around the people who should love you most, I understand that too. But here is what I know now. You do not need their approval to know your own value. Setting boundaries is not revenge, it is survival, and sometimes survival is the most honest form of self-respect. Sometimes the family you build with truth, choice, and care becomes stronger than the one bound only by blood. My parents still have not truly apologized, not in the full way truth and accountability would require. Charles Bennett speaks very little now. Vivian Bennett calls sometimes, and I answer when I can. Ethan Bennett and Rebecca Bennett are trying, and I can respect effort without pretending the past did not happen. But I am not waiting for them to change before I allow myself to live fully and without shame. I am living the life I built, the life I earned, and the life that belongs entirely to me. That is not a perfect ending. It is a real one, and real endings do not need applause to matter. Real endings need truth, boundaries, and enough courage to stop performing for people who never saw your heart. So if this story found you in a hard place, let it remind you that being cast out is not the end. You can survive what was meant to break you, and you can build something beautiful from what they discarded. Do not let anyone convince you that silence is the price of belonging. It is not. It never was. Choose truth over image. Choose dignity over fear. Choose the people who choose you back without conditions. And when the time comes, choose yourself, even if your voice shakes, even if the room does not want the truth. Thank you for listening to my story and walking with me from the rain to the life beyond it. If it meant something to you, remember this lesson. Everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and loved without performance. Protect your peace, honor your story, and never trade your self-worth for the approval of those who abandoned you. The past may explain your pain, but it does not get to own your future unless you hand it the keys. Build the life that tells the truth about who you are, not the lie other people need for their comfort. Love the people who stand beside you in storms, not the ones who return only when they need your reflection. And if you are still healing, take your time. Healing is not weakness. It is the work of becoming whole again. I lost a family that never truly held me, but I gained a life shaped by courage, work, and chosen love. That is the lesson I leave with you. Your value does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. Walk away from the porch if you must. Build anyway, rise anyway, live anyway, tell the truth anyway. Some people spend a lifetime protecting appearances. Others spend a lifetime becoming real. Choose the second life. Because at the end, peace belongs to those who stop begging to be included and start building what is worthy. I was once the daughter they erased, the girl in the rain with one suitcase and nowhere safe to stand. Now I am Amelia Bennett, mother, founder, survivor, truth-teller, and proof that rejection does not get the final word. My story is not about revenge. It is about refusing invisibility and choosing a life no lie can bury again. If you carry old wounds, may this remind you that your voice matters even after years of enforced silence. And may you remember that the family you build with honesty can become the home you were denied at birth.